Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 14.24 jungle tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There are a couple of big things to talk about this patch. Warwick is the key thing. This champion has been overbuffed and then nerfed. I'll talk about where he's kind of landed in a moment, but it looks to be relatively similar, if not weaker. Other champions which got nerfed are Graves, Talon, Mundo, Elise, Ambessa, and Poppy. And then Yi received an adjustment which didn't really do a huge amount, but I'll talk about that one as well. So the D tier is going to consist of the same three champions, being Maokai, who is still a very underperformant jungler. The champion's basically not played anymore. The buffs elevated his pick rate briefly, but he's gone back to being unpopular. I'll probably end up removing him next patch, but he is a utility-centric jungler. You don't put resources into him, and he will still have good value, but he clears slowly. He doesn't really have any individual agency per se, and he struggles considerably at the moment, so going to be in the D tier. I'd recommend playing him in the support role or the top lane if you want to play Maokai. Rengar is an incredibly elite-skewed assassin. He is probably one of the worst things you can possibly play in low elo jungle. Requires a huge amount of mastery and knowledge of the champion to really execute well, and it's just a pick I'd really recommend avoiding at the moment. Silas doesn't clear particularly well. Also another champion which I believe, I know I have him on here. So the problem with Silas is his clear. It's slow, it's not particularly healthy, and the adjustments he received more recently, well, I say recently, like couple patches ago, within like the last 10 patches, hurt him. It hurt his jungle viability. He relies on explosively snowballing the game to really get value, get his items online, so he can really function as a jungler. The changes to make him more of a bruiser, like within the mid lane, being like your Protobelt Cosmic Drive variant, kind of ruined his viability as a jungler, so he does also sit within the D tier. Ambessa drops from the C tier to the D tier. She is considerably weaker this patch. The nerfs towards her W are big. I would say the problem with Ambessa is long term she will be balanced around elite. She's a champion which I imagine won't get supported in the jungle, especially if she finds viability as both a mid laner and a top laner long term. But she can still function at the moment. I will have her on here because I do believe there is merit to learning the champion, kind of akin to most things on this list, but she is definitely considerably weaker, so she does land herself a spot within the D tier. Moving on to the C tier, then we have a lot of the elite skewed assassin junglers. You've got your Gragas's, you've got your Eves, who is weak at the moment. I think Eve is just across the board in a pretty rough spot. Gragas can still function as an elite jungler. Nasus is surprisingly able to maintain a play rate within the jungle. Obviously, you just play for scale, or for your stacking and then your scaling, looking to obviously abuse the fact that you can be a really strong team fighter once you have access to those stacks. And most people won't punish you the lower down you go. Obviously, this champion will just have like if you were to look at his win rate graph, it will just decline the higher elo you go because people will punish it more consistently. So he does sit within the C tier, but he can still function the lower down you go. Kindred, Nidalee, other champions which are very elite skewed. These two picks obviously require a lot of mastery of the champion, understanding good invade timers. For Kindred, mark rotations, spacing are all very valuable, and honestly Nidalee as well. Spacing and just early invades are very core to this champion and enable her to have relevance within the game. Two picks I'd very much recommend avoiding the lower down you are. Pantheon is a pick which is, I believe, got more potential than maybe what the tier list kind of shows. I think this champion can actually be a couple tiers higher, especially if you put the time into playing him. He doesn't have an absurdly steep mastery curve, but he requires very, very good aggression, very good aggression. Like, you just have to be aggressive to really make this champion work, relying on snowballing and kind of just punishing people who miss position, and then your point and click ganks can be valuable. So there is definitely merit to Pantheon. We saw Spearshot recently hit Grandmaster playing the champion in the jungle, so yeah, if you want to watch some VODs of this champion being piloted there, I'd recommend going and checking him out. But this pick definitely does have a level of potential to it. Hecarim is more elite skewed than he's probably been in a while. This champion requires, once again, a lot of snowballing, more precise plays, and making sure you're positioning effectively to get value out of his full kit. He's definitely not the old tank Hecarim or the full-on assassin. He sits as more like a skirmisher to bruiser kind of area at the moment, which does give him some more margin for error, but he still plays very similar to an assassin, so you can definitely be punished if you misplay and then fall behind. Zed is like your flex mid option from your flex mid to jungle option. I still have Talon rated higher than him. Talon has obviously been nerfed this patch, but I'm not suddenly going to promote Zed as an option. He's just there for you if you want someone with a really fast clear and you already have a lot of proficiency on the champion. Talia is, I think, underrated as a jungler. I don't think she's like good by any means. I think she still struggles definitely, and could probably do with a buff to like really bring her back to viability. But a lot of people saying like she's like non-viable at the moment. I think that's not true. I think this champion does still like with gold and with correct like team fight control can still very much be valuable and have a function within the game. Obviously, the lower down you go, the harder to pilot this champion is going to be. I'm not going to recommend her for gold to like plat, but like emerald, diamond, once you start going into those like elo brackets, you can definitely make her function if you do have good proficiency on the champion. Brand is basically out the jungle at this point. I don't want to say stopped supporting him, but the last sort of nerfs really just took his power level down aggressively. Whether we see him in competitive next year probably will spell the fate for this champion. I don't think he's going to maintain his spot within the jungle tier list. He's already very unpopular, and I do have him as a C2 option. I'd recommend avoiding Brand for the moment. There are considerably more consistent AP options out there for you. What other picks we got? So moving on to the B tier then, we have Skarner, who is a great elite tank. But the problem with Skarner at the moment, he is incredibly elite skewed. They keep nerfing his damage, which is going to be more low elo skewed. The higher up you go, the more utility focused and like they will value in a champion. Like the less resources they can give to Skarner, the better. Skarner still does have like good builds with like the heart still and you're like unending Sterix or Sterix unending. It really comes down to what you need within the game. But for lower down, he's not going to really net you the results you want. But the higher up you go, if you are willing to learn this champion and stick with him, should be a good champion to have within your arsenal. So I will recommend trying Skarner, and if you find success, sticking with him. If you're not finding success with Skarner, there are better tanks with more agency and more damage accessible to them. Zyra had her spike in play rate, and I would comfortably say she's better than Brand. Like, she is a pretty close to A tier pick within the jungle. Her play rate has slightly declined again, but she's, yeah, a solid option. She clears relatively fast. She has very good AP DPS, and for a jungle meta with a mostly filled with AD options, Zyra can definitely be a good champion to have within your pool at the moment, when I think she's in a relatively decent spot. She's obviously relying on you to clear well, and like clearing can be a skill in itself, so she does sit like more of a mid to high end B tier option. Vi obviously has been pushed more towards competitive over the last, I want to say like 2 years. They've tried to do some stuff to her to make her better for the average player. And I think she's in a fine spot. Like, you can very much find success on Vi. The build I would recommend personally is like a Trinity Force Frozen Heart Spirits trio. I actually think Spirits is a really underrated item on Vi at the moment. And Frozen Heart is a very valuable utility option accessible to you. Well, yeah, being very cheap. So Vi definitely, I think, is a slightly underrated, and you can definitely find success on her. But I would promote other options over her, as she does rely a bit on team play to really make her ultimate and her playstyle kind of function a bit better. Udyr is definitely towards the low end of the B tier, whereas the other champions here, I would say, have a bit more potential higher up you go. Udyr does require a lot of mastery to play, and like rotating the correct abilities and taking the right forms when you really need them can definitely be something to adapt to, especially when you want to go like an AD build or an, like a tank AP variant. Obviously, the AD build looks to be a bit more performant, I believe, at the moment, but you can still definitely find success on the tank variant, and yeah, it's one of those picks which I just recommend putting a lot of time into, and if you're not willing to do that, then you can kind of avoid him for the most part, and it shouldn't really alter your success within the game. Gwen, Karthus, pretty elite skewed AP junglers. They sit towards the low end of the B tier, but definitely have really high ceilings. Gwen is a great answer to like heavy tank compositions as like a flex option from top to jungle. Karthus is a great jungler. He has a very, very high ceiling. If you are consistently landing Qs, you're utilizing your ultimate effectively within the game, you're maximizing your clear speed. That is a very important one with Karthus. Like, probably more than any other champion in the game. It's just making sure you're clearing as fast and then sequencing continuously over and over again. That is the skill to this champion. He does sit in my B tier at the moment, but can definitely rise up if you are willing to put the time into him. Rek'Sai, Lisa, Rek'Sai is very unpopular at the moment. Still functional as a jungler. I think she's over nerfed. I would like to see her more as like an A and probably close to S tier option to really find her like footing within the game. Obviously, the unique gank angles can give her some variety. Her ult has really high damage to it, and that can definitely be quite a valuable champion to have within your arsenal. Obviously, it's not necessary, so you can kind of skip her. Lee Sin is obviously every jungler's dream of being able to play well. If you can execute this champion in really well within the game, you will find results, and he can definitely be really powerful. Obviously, if you don't snowball, you're not really utilizing the full effectiveness of his kit. He loses a lot of value, and that is why he has like 1,000 games worth of like mastery curve to him. So if you're willing to put a lot of time into Lee Sin, he can definitely be a really valuable champion. I don't think he's necessary at the moment, and I think over time he's been maybe not power crept, but other champions have comparable kits in terms of what they can really provide to Lee Sin to kind of enable them to function within the jungle. Moving on from Lee Sin then. So Bel'Veth is very elite skewed. She has been since release, mostly focused around like actually her early game more than anything, like early Raptor stills, getting you like your first items on board, whether like your Stride Breakers, your Kraken Slayers. It can vary, Bork even. She's definitely over time been put in a pretty weird spot, and I think it's not great long term. I think actually over time, what they should have done with Bel'Veth is they should have just made her better for the average player rather than this like elite masters plus kind of locked jungler. I still think she's fine though. I think she can definitely still function later on in the game, especially if people just allow you to stats check them in a lot of situations. So I do have her as like a B tier option, but I would promote other things over her, as she is a bit more elite skewed in her current state. But if you're willing to put the time, she can definitely be valuable. Echo is a solid AP skirmisher assassin. He can definitely be a very solid pick, especially if you are snowballing, getting an early like Darksteel, Magi stacks. There is definitely lots of value to this champion. I have Diana slightly higher than him at the moment, but they're pretty comparable as champions. They have relatively similar goals. It comes down to just clearing once again, finding those angles to really execute as like a counter ganker. That is like Echo's main kind of focus within the game, just tracking enemy jungler. And if you want to develop that skill, he's definitely a really good valuable champion to have. Other than that though, I'd say there's slightly better AP picks, but he's still definitely a champion you can execute and find success on. Shaco is, Shaco is for two build variants. You have the AD and the AP variant of Shaco, and I do believe AP oftentimes outperforms AD. However, AD is very reliant on aggression, snowballing, tends to be a bit more like, that is what the OTPs will traditionally play, because the AP1, more often than not, is like a sit back, traps, control kind of champion. Kind of akin to something like a Teemo, except for maybe Shaco doesn't really have the same level of 1v1 potential that like a Teemo has. And I would say, Shaco is considerably harder, has a like unique clear in a way, and I have him as more like a mid-beta option at the moment. So Master Yi, he received the critical strike changes to his Q. It hasn't really done anything. He's still the same champion. You're still playing like the on-hit variation of Master Yi. It was a interesting way and like thing they did to him to try and encourage maybe some like IE purchases and some like crit hybrids, but it just never really functioned. It never really worked. He just doesn't have great crit options for him at the moment. Yuntao's Rush looks bad, and it's just not something I'm really going to recommend. So Yi going to remain as a B2 option. Just play the on-hit build, and you should still find success where you were before. Other than that, though, he requires aggression, snowballing, getting so much gold to really make him the hyper carry he wants to be within the game. Poppy stayed kind of neutral for jungle. She's probably a bit weaker now. The champion obviously relies on like coming out more as a counter pick into like high mobility comps. Like when you see Lee Sin, for example, Poppy is usually something you do consider in most spots. But the Sundered Sky build, I almost said Divine Syndra, the Sundered Sky build looks to be in a really strong spot at the moment because of the AD ratio buff to her Q. And if you get the levels, then you are gaining back that armor which you lost through the base value. So she's better later on and better on like your one item Sundered Sky spike. Do you usually pick Poppy for those spikes? I mean, sometimes you do. Like, sometimes you genuinely want her around that Cinder Sky Spike, and then she can really, like, take over the game, be quite a powerful bruiser tank in a lot of situations. And I think she still definitely does have value, so I'm going to leave her in the B tier. I still think it's definitely strength to this pick. Morgana, Lilia are more of my dot mages within the B tier. They can sit alongside the likes of Zyra. Lilia is considerably weaker ever since they nerfed her, so she does drop down a couple of tiers. Morgana still has a relatively good clear and is it's usually easier to play than the other options, but she's less consistent, and that does hurt her, so she does also find herself within the B tier. Jax is a great answer to like your auto attackers, your Trundles, your Xin Zhaos, your Volibears, for example. I think those are usually the times where you're going to bring him out. Outside of that, you're not really playing Jax jungle. He's a flex option from top to jungle, though, so if you do have expertise playing the champion in the top lane, he can definitely be picked here and find success. So I'm going to leave him as a B tier option. Ivan's very unique. He's a good enchanter option within the jungle. Utilizing Daisy and like his unique clears can definitely be a skill ceiling to the champion, and like good bush placement and like just maximizing the value of the champion I think is pretty unique compared to every other jungler in the game. But if you are willing to put the time in, he is a very valuable pick to have, so I do really promote the idea of playing Ivan. Obviously he's non-traditional, he's very unique, and that can definitely be a barrier to entry of the pick. The other three champions which remain here are Rammus, who is a bit better after his buffs. I don't think he suddenly makes the jump up into A tier, albeit he's a very easy champion to play. He is conditional. You want to play him into AD compositions. But yeah, the Q buff and there was one other buff, but I can't remember off the top of my head. The Q buff was the main thing, though. The cooldown got cut from 16. Actually, it might have just been the Q buff. The Q buff was like a cut down from 16 seconds to 4 to from 12 to 4, I believe, if I remember correctly. And yeah, that did something to help his early clears, helps his early fight potential. It is going to be innately high elo skewed, but Rammus as a champion is innately low elo skewed. He is a tank, which doesn't have a huge amount of skill expression to him, but yeah, play him into AD compositions, you should still find the same level of success. I don't think he suddenly makes the jump up into the A tier though. Kha'Zix, Zac wrap up the other two B tier champions. Kha'Zix is still a great snowballing AD assassin who can definitely find success, especially playing into the right compositions. He did get nerfed though, so he does drop from the A tier to the B tier. They went once again tagged his W, so he does lose more value out of that evolve. In Zac's case, they nerfed his Q, and that dropped him from the A tier to the B tier. He's slightly weaker, he's just going to be outputting a bit less damage, but he's still a very solid tank option, especially mid-game where he really does shine as a pick. The two champions dropping down then are Talon and Elise. Elise lost 30 base HP. It's enough. Elise was already a low A tier pick, especially in mid to low elo. She's obviously going to be more elite skewed, but this just pushes her over the edge. It pushes her down to the B tier. You can still find success as like a really good AP snowballing assassin, and the quality of life changes she received back along still feel really good on her. So if you do feel comfortable with the champion, you're still going to play it, but you are just going to be less durable early on, and that is more consistently going to lead to you losing if you misplay. Just less durability. In Talon's case, he lost some damage to jungle monsters, which is really big on Talon. Talon wants to invade poach away camps, and the amp to his W really just allowed him to do that, and once again they stripped 10% off of it, so he does become weaker. He drops from the A tier to the B tier. I still think Talon is one of the best elite junglers you can play, even with these nerfs, but for the average player, he is going to drop down to the B tier now. So the other picks in the A tier then, we have Shyvana and Briar, who are very low elo picks. They don't really find success or play rate outside of like diamond below. But they are very good like champions with like clear win cons. Shyvana wants to play around her ultimate, Drake stacking. She's has a relatively simplistic kit, and that can definitely really provide her with value, especially in the lower ranks. In Briar's case, they gave her 30 base HP when they buffed her, I believe in 14.22 or 1, and that does enable her to do more of what she wants to do, and that's just start checking people down, utilizing that W, and then her ult being that global ability, which kind of allows her to threaten lanes. She is going to be low elo skewed. That is just something which is very clear over time, and I'd say she's like a low A tier pick, but does struggle the higher up you go. Trundle remains as an A-tier pick. I think he's an underrated A-tier pick. I think the lethal tempo changes combined with the buffs he received more recently. Did he get buffed? I think he did. I believe he did get buffed more recently, and that was enough to like really enable him to once again function as a jungler. You don't need Tiamat as much as you used to in the past. You are still going to have a hard time clearing multi-camps, like multi-enemy camps, things like Raptors, obviously. But you can go things like Tiamat into Trinity, into like a Titanic Hydra or a Ravenous Hydra, and these can all function well on him. He's obviously supposed to be like an anti-tank or anti-AD stats checker. Don't play him into AP, utilize him as a counter pick, and you should definitely find success. He is one of the easiest champions to play in the game. Diana is a slightly better version of Echo, I'd say, at the moment. She's more early game focused, but really thrives off getting a lot of AP to really amp her clear speed. And I'd say that is where she really shines as an option. Fiddlesticks, I've actually missed Sejuani. I'll talk about Sejuani in a second. But yeah, Fiddlesticks still remains as an A-tier pick. He is someone you want to put a lot of time into to really, like... Okay, so the value of Fiddlesticks is his ultimate is a great team fighting tool and can swing the flow of games. He also has a really nice, healthy clear. He is primarily played by OTPs, like people who really, like, understand the functionality of the champion. But I do still think, as a pick, he is very good at the moment. Sejuani I missed. She still remains as a C-tier option. She is the premier utility tank. She is like Maokai, but popular. Going to be played mostly in Elite and competitive. I don't see that swinging anytime soon unless they really amp up like the health ratio on W and then nerf down maybe some of her CC output. Other A-tier picks then are Mordekaiser, who is a great low elo AP jungler. He does lose value considerably the higher rank you go, so I do think if you are looking to take a champion from all the way from low elo to high elo, Mordekaiser's not going to be that option. But as like a anti-tank mid-game fighter, and honestly like level 6 onwards fighter, like he is quite valuable, and his objective taking, his clearing, relatively good. So Mordekaiser sits as a solid A-tier option. Nunu, also going to be in the A-tier, has both the tank build and the AP build. AP obviously going to be primarily played by like the one tricks of the champion, but can just function generalistically. Obviously reliant on snowballing, getting a lot of AP to like one-shot targets with the W and ult combo. Other than that though, the tank build was pretty standard. Doesn't scale that well. Like Nunu really spikes like on a 1-2 item bait, like on that kind of in that area where you can still function like as this lane ganker. His team fighting isn't great. His objective taking is good, but like you're not playing him for control over objectives. He just doesn't have that same level of value. His main value is the gank setup on laners early on into the game. If you play around that, he can be a very successful jungler. Teemo sits within the A-tier. The nerfs to him last patch dragged him from the S-tier down, so he does not clear as fast as he did, and that does affect him. He's still a great scaling option. He has great control over objectives. He's relatively simple to play, and I still think that holds him up as being a good A-tier option. Volibear is a great A-tier jungler. The nerfs towards his E it dropped him from the low S-tier to the high A-tier. He's still one of my highest A-tier options. He's pretty close to the S-tier, with one of the champions out in the S-tier dropping down. Stat checky, very good gank and tower dive like setup with his ultimate, and his cubing a very nice CC ability. His biggest weakness is his scaling. Like he doesn't scale that well, but with some of the build options you have, he is an incredibly good mid game fighter, and it can be really threatening to play against this champion. Combined with his early game being pretty strong as well, I think Volibear is a very solid A-tier option. Definitely something I would really recommend playing. If you're looking for a team fighter, playing around like 1 item, 2 item spikes, then Wukong is what you want to go for. He does struggle in other situations, but really is one of the best in those like team fighting spots where you would want to really play around him. His clear is fine. They did buff him more recently as well, so he does sit as like a solid A-tier option, probably like a high A-tier option if anything. The other picks here, we have Kayn, Viego and Amumu. In Kayn's case, both blue and red are viable options. Red is going to be better in low elo, where you have more margin for error, and more often than not, you're playing into like tankier team compositions. Blue is elite skewed. It's an assassin build. That's just how that's going to go. But I do believe both are very viable, especially if you can pick the right one, if depending on what the game needs. Amumu and Viego are my two other A-tier picks. Actually, there's three. I'll talk about Mordecai Mundo in a second. But yeah, Viego, it sits as like a high A-tier pick. He's, even with the armor nerf, he's still a very solid option here. It was a slight slap on the wrist. It dropped him from the S tier to the A-tier. But if you can get first takedown on this champion and you're clearing effectively, he is still one of the best AD junglers you have accessible to you. In Amumu's case, he's a great AP tank option, outputting a huge amount of damage, having very simplistic CC, and yeah, being probably my recommended go-to tank jungler at the moment. In Mundo's case, he got nerfed this patch, and it just drops him from like a mid A tier pick within the jungle to a low A tier pick. He is very, very low elo skewed. The higher up you go, this champion will massively decline. He is probably one of the biggest declining champions on this list. So I would recommend avoiding him if you're looking for something to climb long term, unless you like know the specific games where you really want to play him, because he can find, like, the champion doesn't suddenly become non-viable. It just struggles a lot more in more scenarios, but he will still have spots where he's good, where you can free scale, and you can still be this late game unkillable menace which outputs a lot of damage. The other 5 picks here then. So Xin and Jarvan remain as S tier picks. They are my recommended go-to AD junglers with very simplistic playstyles and what you want to do around these champions. Jarvan's EQ, R setup, and his team fighting ability, and his ganks more than anything, are all very, very good and very clear win cons within the game. He does clear slower than Xin, but Xin doesn't really clear fast either. These champions just, in Xin Zhao's case, he wants to act as more of a skirmisher, great 1v1 potential, great ganks, that can act as like a pseudo tank with the ultimate. Very, very valuable picks, which I do recommend. Graves drops down to the A tier. The champion obviously got nerfed this patch. They took 20% AD ratio off the Q explosion, and that does hurt him, and he does lose a lot of value as an AD pick within the jungle. He's still going to be good if you put a lot of gold into him. He can still output huge amounts of damage. It's just less, and he's going to clear slower, so he does drop down. Nocturne and Warwick are my other 2 S tier picks. So Warwick was the best champion in the game. The hotfix nerf to him might have actually left him lower than he was pre-patch, so it'll be interesting to see how it sits long term. I could see him dropping down to A with the current trajectory of the changes. But he can still find you success. I still think Warwick is a very good champion. He is incredibly early game skewed. He's a great stat checker. He has large margin for error early on. Obviously later on into the game, when you're playing more team fight situations, he does struggle a lot more. You'll more often get bursted, and you won't be able to find these sustained combat situations. But if you're playing onto sides with people, he can be a really valuable champion. And then Nocturne. I love Nocturne. He is the premier level 6 I want to go in, or I want to play around my ultimate jungler. The pick obviously is relatively simplistic, great after level 6 and great mid game. That is where he really does spike. He can function mid to late as a utility option, but really does fall off quite aggressively, so that is just the thing you have to be aware of. But if you play around his ultimate, you're stacking objectives, you're playing around your laners, he is a great champion, a great clear win con, and probably my recommended pick of the patch. But those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.